The lights in the meeting room were too bright, making Alex Kane squint as he adjusted his datapad for the third time. His hands felt sweaty despite the cool air flowing through the ship's ventilation system. Around the long metal table, his fellow crew members from the research vessel Meridian sat quietly, waiting for their first official meeting with alien visitors. Captain Lisa Rodriguez checked her watch and smoothed down her uniform. She had been in space for 15 years, but this was her first contact with a non-human species. Her dark eyes showed excitement mixed with worry. Beside her, Jake Miller drummed his fingers on the table. As the ship's navigation officer, he had guided them to this remote system where the aliens had agreed to meet. Amy Watson sat across from Alex, her communication equipment ready to record everything. She gave him a small smile, which helped calm his nerves a little. They had worked together for 2 years, and she knew how hard he had prepared for this moment. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and the aliens entered. Alex had seen pictures, but seeing them in person was different. The Zephyrians were tall, almost 7 feet, with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. Their heads were longer than human heads, with large black eyes that took up most of their faces. They wore flowing robes that changed color as they moved. Ambassador Krelthax led the group. His robe was deep purple with gold patterns that seemed to move on their own. Behind him came Science Minister Velkan, whose green robe marked his position. 3 other Zephyrians followed, their robes showing they were assistants or guards. Captain Rodriguez stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome aboard the Meridian. I am Captain Lisa Rodriguez." Krelthax looked at her hand for a moment before touching it briefly with one long finger. "We acknowledge your greeting, Primitive One. I am Ambassador Krelthax of the Zephyrian Empire." The word primitive hung in the air like a bad smell. Alex saw Amy's eyebrows rise, but she kept recording. "Please sit," Captain Rodriguez said, her voice staying calm and professional. The aliens took their seats, which had been specially made to fit their tall bodies. Krelthax looked around the room with what seemed like amusement. "Your vessel is quaint," he said. "We have studied your species from a distance. You have barely left your home system, yes? How many worlds do you control?" "Earth is our home world," Captain Rodriguez replied. "We have colonies on Mars and research stations throughout our solar system. We're expanding slowly but steadily." Velkan made a sound that might have been laughter. "One system. How limited." Alex felt his face grow hot. He had spent years studying for this moment, learning everything he could about the possibility of alien life. His research on quantum biosynthesis had won awards on Earth. But sitting here, listening to these beings talk about his species like they were children, made him feel small. "Dr. Kane here is our lead xenobiologist," Captain Rodriguez said, gesturing to Alex. "He's done extensive theoretical work on cross-species genetic compatibility." Alex stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "I've been working on theories about how different species might share genetic markers across vast distances. The quantum nature of DNA suggests that—" "Stop," Krelthax held up one long hand. "Did this creature just suggest that primitive human science could understand genetic structures across species?" The other Zephyrians made sounds that were clearly laughter. Velkan's eyes seemed to grow even larger as he stared at Alex. "Young human," Velkan said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your species has barely mapped its own genetic code. You think you can understand the genetics of beings who have traveled between stars for 1,000 years? Alex felt his face burning. "With respect, sir, the quantum properties of genetic material don't change based on the age of a civilization. The mathematics are universal." "Mathematics!" Krelthax laughed, a high-pitched sound that made Amy wince. This pet scientist thinks mathematics work the same everywhere. How amusing. "Perhaps," Velkan added, "you could show us your calculations? We could use some entertainment." Alex looked at Captain Rodriguez, who nodded slightly. He activated his datapad and projected his research onto the wall screen. Charts and equations filled the display, showing complex relationships between quantum states and genetic expression. For several minutes, Alex explained his work. He talked about how certain genetic patterns might exist across different species due to quantum entanglement at the molecular level. He showed how theoretical cross-species compatibility might be possible under specific conditions. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Krelthax began to laugh again. "Childish, human dabbling," the ambassador said. "You play with numbers like a young one plays with toys." Velkan nodded. "Impossible fantasies. Your species lacks the brain capacity to understand true genetic science." "Now wait just a minute," Jake Miller started to say, but Captain Rodriguez put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sure Dr. Kane's work has value," she said diplomatically. "Perhaps we could arrange for some of our scientists to work with yours?" "Work with?" Krelthax seemed amazed. "Captain, your pet scientist here just presented theories that violate basic laws of genetic science. We would be happy to provide some remedial education for your people." Alex sat back down, his hands shaking slightly. Years of work, dismissed as if it meant nothing. He caught Amy looking at him with sympathy, which somehow made it worse. "We have established a research station on the moon of this system," Velkan announced. "We could provide basic science lessons for your crew. Consider it charity work." The meeting continued for another hour, but Alex barely heard any of it. The aliens agreed to a limited cultural exchange, though it was clear they saw humans as barely worth their time. They spoke about humanity as if discussing interesting animals they had found. When the aliens finally left, the room felt different. Smaller somehow. Captain Rodriguez sat back down heavily. "Well, that could have gone better." "They treated us like we were stupid children," Jake said angrily. "They treated Alex worse than that," Amy added. "Like he was some kind of pet." Alex gathered his datapad and stood up. "I need some air." "Alex," Captain Rodriguez called after him. "Don't let them get to you, your work is solid." But Alex was already walking toward the door. In the hallway he could still hear the echoes of alien laughter. He made his way to his small quarters and sat down at his desk. For a long time, he stared at his research notes. Then he opened a secure communication channel and began typing a message. The address was simple. M. Turner, Private Residence, Colorado, Earth. The message was even simpler. "They laughed. Just like you said they would. The plan is working perfectly." He sent the message and leaned back in his chair. Outside his small window, stars filled the darkness. Somewhere among them, the Zephyrians were probably still laughing about the primitive human scientist and his impossible theories. If only they knew. 3 weeks had passed since the first meeting, and life aboard the Meridian had settled into an uncomfortable routine. Every morning, Alex Kane would take the shuttle down to the research station the Zephyrians had built on the moon's surface. Every evening, he would return feeling smaller than when he left. The Zephyrian research facility was impressive, Alex had to admit. It sprawled across the gray lunar landscape like a silver city, with towers that reached toward the star-filled sky. Inside, the halls were wide and bright, designed for beings much taller than humans. "Today we will teach you about basic molecular structures," announced Dr. Zethan, the Zephyrian scientist assigned to oversee the human education program. His voice carried the same condescending tone that all the aliens seemed to use when speaking to humans. Alex sat in a chair that was too big for him, next to Amy Watson and 2 other crew members from the Meridian. The Zephyrian had drawn simple diagrams on a floating screen, the kind of molecular charts that human children learned in elementary school. "Now, primitive humans," Dr. Zethan continued. "Can you tell me what this structure represents?" Amy raised her hand. "That's a basic protein chain, sir?" "Correct. Very good for such a young species." Dr. Zethan sounded like he was praising a pet that had learned a new trick. "Perhaps there is hope for your kind after all." Alex clenched his fists under the table. For 3 weeks, they had been subjected to lessons that wouldn't challenge a first-year college student. Meanwhile, his real research sat locked away in his quarters, growing more important each day. During the lunch break, Alex walked alone through the station's observation deck. Through the transparent walls, he could see the planet hanging in space above them, blue and beautiful. His home felt very far away. Feeling homesick, pet scientist? Alex turned to find Science Minister Velkan approaching. The alien's green robes rustled as he moved, and his large black eyes seemed amused. "Just enjoying the view," Alex replied carefully. "Yes, I suppose it must be overwhelming for a primitive mind to see the universe from this perspective." Velkan stood beside him, looking out at the stars. "Tell me, do you still believe in those foolish theories of yours? The ones about genetic compatibility across species?" Alex felt his heart beat faster. "I believe the science is sound." Velkan laughed, that high-pitched sound that Alex had grown to hate. "Science? You call that science? Child, you cannot even properly analyze your own species' genetic code. How could you possibly understand something as complex as interspecies genetics? Maybe if you let me show you my actual research instead of treating me like a student." "Research?" Velkan's eyes seemed to grow even larger. "You mean those primitive calculations you showed us? Those mathematical games?" Alex's face grew hot. "Those calculations took me 5 years to develop. The quantum mechanics involved are beyond your understanding clearly." Velkan turned to face him fully. "Little human, do you know how many species we have studied? How many civilizations we have encountered in our 1,000 years among the stars?" Alex shook his head. "Hundreds. And do you know what they all had in common when we first met them?" "What?" "They all thought they were special. They all believed their primitive science could teach us something new." Velkan's voice dropped lower. "They were all wrong." That evening, Alex sat in his quarters staring at his computer screen. On it were the results of his secret analysis of the Zephyrian biological samples they had been given for the cultural exchange. What he had found made his hands shake. The genetic structure contained sequences that perfectly matched his theoretical models. Not close matches, perfect ones. The quantum signatures in their DNA showed patterns that his research had predicted might exist in advanced species. More than that, there were dormant genetic markers that suggested the Zephyrians had once been capable of the very interspecies compatibility he had theorized about. It was all there, hidden in their cells like ancient memories. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Amy entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You missed dinner again." "Thanks." Alex accepted the coffee gratefully. "How were the afternoon lessons?" "Dr. Zethan taught us about gravity today. Apparently things fall down." Amy sat on his small couch. "Alex, this is getting ridiculous. We're not learning anything we didn't know in high school." "That's the point. They want us to feel stupid." Amy was quiet for a moment. "Jake and I have been talking, some of the other crew members too. We know your work is brilliant. We've seen what you can do." "Have you? Because sometimes I wonder if..." "They're right. Maybe I am just playing with numbers like a child plays with toys." "Stop that." Amy's voice was sharp. "I was there when you figured out the protein synthesis problem that had the medical team stumped for months. I watched you solve quantum equations that made Dr. Harrison back on Earth call you a genius." Alex looked at his screen again. The genetic data stared back at him, full of secrets the Zephyrians didn't even know they carried. "Amy, what if I told you I found something that proves my theories were right all along? I'd say it's about time." Alex hesitated. Captain Rodriguez had been very clear about sharing any discoveries with the command team first, but she had also been under increasing pressure from Earth Command to keep the peace with the Zephyrians. "Can't tell anyone yet, not until I'm sure." Amy studied his face. "Alex, what did you find?" Before he could answer, his computer chimed with an incoming message. Alex quickly minimized the genetic data and opened his communications. The message was from Earth, from the same private address he had contacted weeks ago. It was short. "How much longer can you endure their teaching? The moment approaches. Stay strong." Amy noticed his expression change. "Good news from home?" "Something like that." Alex closed the message quickly. Amy, can I ask you something? Sure. If you found out that everything you thought you knew about something was wrong, would you want to know the truth? Amy frowned. That's a strange question. But yes, I think so. Why? Alex looked out his small window at the stars. Just wondering. After Amy left, Alex opened the genetic data again. The more he studied it, the more amazing it became. The Zephyrians weren't just compatible with other species. They had evolved from interspecies mixing themselves. Their entire civilization was built on the very science they claimed was impossible. He opened a new message to the private Earth address. The data is incredible. They don't know what they are. The irony is almost too much to bear. When do we proceed? A. The reply came back within an hour. Soon, my dear nephew. Very soon. Your aunt is preparing for a family visit. Alex stared at the message for a long time. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. The next morning at the research station, Dr. Zethan began another basic lesson. Today we will learn about advanced mathematics. Can anyone tell me what 2 plus 2 equals? Several human crew members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Alex just sat quietly, thinking about genetic codes and family visits, and the look on Velkan's face when he finally learned the truth. Dr. Kane, Dr. Zethan called out. You seem distracted. Perhaps mathematics is too difficult for your primitive mind? Alex looked up and smiled. No, sir. I was just thinking about how some equations have more than one solution. Impossible. Mathematics has only one correct answer. Does it? Alex asked quietly. I wonder if you'd be surprised by some of the solutions I've found. That afternoon, long-range sensors detected an approaching vessel. The alarm on the meridian started ringing at exactly 14:30 ship time. Alex was in his quarters, reviewing the Zephyrian genetic data one more time, when the sound made him jump. Emergency alarms meant only one thing: an unknown ship approaching. He quickly saved his work and headed to the bridge. Captain Rodriguez was already there, her face tense as she studied the main screen. Jake Miller sat at his navigation station, his fingers flying over the controls. Report, Captain Rodriguez called out as more crew members arrived. Unknown vessel approaching from the outer system, Jake announced. It's big, Captain, really big. Amy Watson looked up from her communication station. I'm getting readings that don't match anything in our database. The ship's technology is completely unknown. On the main screen, a dot of light grew larger as they watched. Within minutes, it became clear that the approaching vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest Zephyrian ship. Are they responding to our signals? Captain Rodriguez asked. No communication yet, Amy replied. But Captain, I'm detecting some kind of scanning beam. They're looking at us. Down on the moon's surface, the Zephyrians were having their own emergency meeting. Alex could see lights flashing at their research station through his quarters window. Whatever was coming had them worried too. Ambassador Krelthax's voice came over the communication system, sounding less arrogant than usual. Human vessel Meridian, we are detecting an unknown ship approaching. Do you have any knowledge of this? Vessel? Captain Rodriguez picked up the communication device. Negative, Ambassador. This ship is unknown to us as well. Impossible, Velkan's voice cut in. Your species barely has space travel. This vessel shows technology far beyond anything your primitive civilization could produce. Alex felt his heart start beating faster. He looked at Amy, who was monitoring all the communication channels. She caught his eye and nodded slightly. Captain, Amy said quietly, I'm receiving a signal. It's directed at us specifically. Put it through. The main screen flickered and suddenly they were looking at a human face. Alex heard several crew members gasp in surprise. The woman on the screen appeared to be in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant style. Her blue eyes were sharp and intelligent, and she wore what looked like formal diplomatic clothing with subtle technological enhancements. This is Empress Margaret Turner of the Terran Sovereignty, the woman said in a calm, clear voice. I am requesting permission to speak with Captain Rodriguez and her crew. The bridge was completely silent for several seconds. Captain Rodriguez stared at the screen with her mouth slightly open. Jake had stopped typing entirely. Amy's equipment was still recording, but she seemed frozen. Terran sovereignty? Captain Rodriguez finally managed to say. Ma'am, I'm not familiar with... Of course you're not, Captain, Empress Turner replied with a slight smile. We'll explain everything shortly. I'm also requesting permission to speak privately with Dr. Alexander Kane. I believe he's aboard your vessel? All eyes turned to Alex. His face had gone pale, but there was something in his expression that wasn't. Surprise, it was relief. Yes, ma'am, Alex said, stepping forward. I'm here. Empress Turner's smile grew warmer. Hello, Alex. I hope you've been well. I understand there have been some diplomatic complications. Captain Rodriguez looked back and forth between Alex and the screen. Do you two know each other? You could say that, Empress Turner replied. Dr. Kane is my nephew. The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Jake's chair actually rolled backward as he pushed away from his station. Amy dropped her stylus. Captain Rodriguez just stared. Down on the lunar surface, the Zephyrians were having their own moment of shock. Through the communication channels, Alex could hear excited voices speaking in their own language. Your nephew? Captain Rodriguez asked weakly. Indeed. Alexander volunteered for this assignment, though I must say, the treatment he's received has been far worse than we anticipated. Empress Turner's voice had taken on a cooler tone when she mentioned the treatment. Ambassador Krelthax's voice came through the communication system, sounding much less confident than before. Empress Turner, we were not aware that Dr. Kane had any significant connections. Of course you weren't, Ambassador. That was rather the point. Empress Turner's image appeared on the Zephyrian communication channel as well. We prefer to observe new contacts before revealing our true capabilities. Velkan's voice was barely a whisper. True capabilities? The Terran sovereignty has existed for over 2 centuries, Science Minister. We've been expanding quietly through fold space technology while maintaining Earth as our public face. Dr. Kane was serving as our advanced scout. Alex watched as the reactions played out around him. Captain Rodriguez looked like someone had just told her the sky was purple. Jake was shaking his head slowly, as if trying to wake up from a dream. Amy was the first to recover, and she was looking at Alex with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Alex, she said quietly, you've been lying to us this whole time? Not lying, Alex replied. Just not telling the whole truth. I really am a xenobiologist. I really did develop those theories on my own. But yes, I was also reporting back to the sovereignty. How many worlds? Ambassador Krelthax asked, his voice very small. Currently? 437 inhabited systems, Empress Turner replied casually, though we're always finding new ones. The number hung in the air like smoke. The Zephyrian Empire controlled maybe 50 systems, and they had considered themselves one of the major powers in this part of the galaxy. But our intelligence, Velkan, protested weakly. Our scouts reported that Earth was a single-world civilization. Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see, Empress Turner explained. We've found it's much easier to judge the character of new species when they think they're dealing with primitives. Alex could almost hear the pieces clicking together in the Zephyrians' minds. All those condescending comments, all that laughter, all those dismissive remarks about human intelligence and capability. Dr. Kane's research, Velkan said slowly. Was it real? Completely real, Empress Turner confirmed. In fact, Alexander's theories about cross-species genetic compatibility have already revolutionized medicine across dozens of our worlds. His work on quantum biosynthesis has solved problems that plagued our scientists for years. Captain Rodriguez finally found her voice again. Ma'am, with respect, why wasn't my crew informed of this situation? Because, Captain, we needed authentic reactions. If you had known Alexander's true position, your interactions with the Zephyrians would have been different. We needed to see how they would treat humans they considered inferior. And, Alex asked quietly. Empress Turner's expression grew serious. I'm afraid the results were quite disappointing. However, I believe there may still be hope for a productive relationship, assuming certain apologies are forthcoming. Through the communication channel, they could hear urgent discussions in the Zephyrian language. Finally, Ambassador Krelthax spoke again. Empress Turner, we may have misjudged the situation. Indeed you did, Ambassador. The question now is what we do about it. Alex looked around the bridge at his fellow crew members. Amy was starting to smile, probably thinking about all the times she had defended his work. Jake looked like he was trying to do complex mathematics in his head. Captain Rodriguez still seemed stunned. Aunt Margaret, Alex said, I think it's time they saw the rest of the fleet. The space around the meridian began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Alex watched the faces of his crewmates as dozens of ships began to appear out of nowhere, materializing from what seemed like empty space. Jake Miller's mouth fell open as his navigation screen filled with new contacts. Captain, I'm reading over 200 vessels. 215 to be exact, Empress Margaret Turner corrected from the main screen. Though that's just the advance fleet. The main battle group is holding position 3 light hours away. Amy Watson's hands shook as she tried to process all the communication signals suddenly filling her equipment. Ships of every size surrounded them, from small scout vessels to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian ship. Captain Rodriguez finally managed to close her mouth. How long have they been there? Since before your first meeting with the Zephyrians, Alex answered quietly. Fold space technology allows us to stay hidden in dimensional pockets. We've been watching everything. Down on the lunar surface, the Zephyrian research station had gone completely quiet. No more lights flashed. No more activity could be seen. It was as if the entire facility had frozen in shock. Ambassador Krelthax's voice came through the communication channel, barely above a whisper. How many ships do you have in total? In this sector? About 3,000. Empress Turner's tone was casual, as if she was discussing the weather. Galaxy-wide, we maintain a fleet of approximately 50,000 vessels of various classes. The silence that followed was so complete that Alex could hear the hum of the Meridian's life support systems. 50,000 ships represented more military power than most galactic civilizations could imagine. Perhaps, Empress Turner continued, we should discuss this face to face. I'm preparing to come aboard the Meridian, with your permission, Captain. Rodriguez. Of course, Your Majesty. Captain Rodriguez stammered. Please, just Empress will be fine. I'll be bringing a small diplomatic team. Alexander, would you meet us in docking bay too? Alex nodded, then realized she probably couldn't see the gesture clearly. Yes, Aunt Margaret, I'll be there. 20 minutes later, Alex stood in the docking bay watching a sleek shuttle approach. It was unlike any human technology he had seen before, moving with impossible smoothness and landing without making a sound. The shuttle door opened and Empress Margaret Turner stepped out. She was smaller than she had appeared on the screen, but her presence filled the docking bay. Behind her came 3 other people in similar formal attire, each carrying themselves with the confidence of those used to power. Alexander, she said, warmly embracing him. You look tired. It's been a long month, Alex admitted. I imagine so. Dr. Zethan's lessons on basic mathematics must have been particularly challenging for someone who developed quantum biosynthesis theory. Alex smiled for the first time in weeks. You were monitoring the classes? Every single one. We have recordings of Science Minister Velkin explaining gravity to you. I believe his exact words were, things fall down because they are heavy. One of Empress Turner's assistants, a tall woman with short black hair, shook her head. The educational sessions were almost painful to watch. Ambassador Sarah Collins, Empress Turner introduced her. She's been our chief diplomat for first contact situations. She's seen this pattern before. They walked together toward the conference room where Captain Rodriguez and her senior staff were waiting. Along the way, Empress Turner explained how the Terran sovereignty worked. We learned early that revealing our full capabilities immediately often led to fear and hostility, she said. Species tend to react better when they think they're dealing with equals or inferiors. It gives us a chance to see their true character. And what did you see in the Zephyrians? Alex asked. Arrogance, condescension, a belief that technological advancement makes them superior to others. Empress Turner paused. However, we also saw moments of genuine scientific curiosity, particularly from some of their younger researchers. They entered the conference room where Captain Rodriguez, Jake, Amy, and the other senior staff were waiting. Everyone stood as Empress Turner entered, unsure of the proper protocol. "Please sit," she said. "We're all humans here. Well, mostly." She smiled at Alex. "Captain Rodriguez, I want to thank you for taking care of my nephew during this assignment." "Ma'am, I had no idea." "Of course you didn't. That was the point. You treated him as any other crew member, which is exactly what we needed." Empress Turner took a seat at the head of the table. "Now let's discuss what happens next." The communication system activated, and Ambassador Krelthax's voice came through, much more respectful than it had ever been before. "Empress Turner, the Zephyrian delegation requests permission to apologize formally for our treatment of Dr. Kane and the human crew." "Apology accepted, Ambassador. However, I think we need to address the larger issues here." "What issues?" Velkan asked, his voice small. Alex stood up and activated his data pad, projecting his genetic research onto the wall screen. "Science. Minister, remember when you said my theories about cross-species genetic compatibility were impossible?" "Yes," Velkan replied hesitantly. "I've been analyzing the biological samples you provided for the cultural exchange." Alex brought up the genetic sequences. "Your own DNA proves my theories correct. The silence from the lunar surface was deafening. Furthermore," Alex continued, "your genetic code shows clear evidence that the Zephyrian species evolved from interspecies mixing. Your entire civilization is built on the very science you claimed was impossible." Amy leaned forward, suddenly understanding. "That's why you were so confident. You knew you were right." "I had a pretty good idea," Alex admitted, "but seeing the proof was still incredible." Empress Turner stood up. "Science Minister Velkan, your people have been using interspecies genetic therapy for centuries without even realizing it. Dr. Kane's research could help you understand and improve those processes. But how is this possible?" Velkan's voice was barely audible. "Because," Alex said gently, "sometimes the primitive pet scientist knows more than you think." Over the next 2 hours, they worked out the terms of a new relationship. The Zephyrians would formally apologize and offer Alex a position as head of a joint research facility. The Terran sovereignty would share some of its medical advances. Both species would work together on expanding Alex's genetic compatibility research. As the meeting wound down, Ambassador Krelthax asked one final question. "Empress Turner, why reveal yourselves now? You could have remained hidden." "Because," she replied, "Alexander's treatment crossed a line. We protect our own, Ambassador, always." Later, as the Zephyrian delegation prepared to leave, Velkan requested a private word with Alex. "Dr. Kane," the science minister said quietly, "I owe you a personal apology. Your research is extraordinary. I was wrong to dismiss it." "Science isn't about being right or wrong," Alex replied. "It's about learning. Maybe we can learn together now." That evening, Alex stood on the observation deck with Amy and Jake, watching the Terran fleet moving in perfect formation around them. Ships that had been hidden for weeks now flew openly, their lights reflecting off the lunar surface. "So," Amy said, "anything else you want to tell us? Are you secretly the heir to the galactic throne or something?" Alex laughed. "No, just a scientist, with a very supportive family." Jake shook his head. "I still can't believe they fell for it all that time calling you primitive." "The best part," Alex said, pulling up his latest research on his data pad, "is that they're going to help me prove that their impossible theories about quantum consciousness aren't just possible. They're already being used in Sector 7. Amy grinned. "You're going to enjoy this, aren't you?" Alex looked out at the stars, where hundreds of human ships moved like a school of fish through the darkness. "After a month of basic mathematics lessons? Yes, I think I'm going to enjoy this. Very much." In the distance, the Zephyrian research station was coming back to life, its lights blinking in what almost looked like a welcoming pattern. The universe had just become a much more interesting place.